Well, I have time, so according to my usual uh, method, I'm going to do a video to keep alive the subscribers, etc., things that are on my mind. Obviously, we just had Hurricane Ian devastate Fort Myers. A friend of mine uh, lives there next to the river, and his house, I think, is on stilts. In any case, his brother said that the house was 12 feet above the ground. And nevertheless, this friend of mine saw the water rushing up the stairs and I think invade the kitchen, etc. And so it's quite a devastation. And then, of course, there are 100 people dead, etc. So there's no doubt about that we're getting worse and worse storms. People, even if insurance were some sort of great remedy, which it can be a big help. I had a little water leak from my bathtub, and that was a whole production. That was a whole week of mitigation people coming in, water damage people with machines, drying everything out here in Florida. And of course, I had to have my whole bathtub replaced and all that. And that minor thing was upsetting. And so I've talked about the climate before, and I think that it's too late to do too much, certainly quickly. But a disaster like that should be an additional warning, exhortation to, on this day that the Jews celebrate Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, or Teshuvah, or turning back to God and asking for forgiveness and fasting and afflicting yourself and all these things in Leviticus 16. Certainly, this storm, and I know that certain family members of this person were said to have, I don't know whether they did or not, but to have poo-pooed Pope Francis by insisting that care for our common home is incredibly important. So until yesterday, you could say, until very recently, maybe still now, there are people who choose to believe that not much needs to change in our treatment of the planet because these are cyclical things. Maybe we'll build a house, 12 or 15 feet above the ground. Maybe we have insurance. You minimize, especially if it occurs in some other countries, even poorer places with more damage. You choose not to believe that our actions in every sphere regarding the planet, regarding other nations, the history we have to deal with, critical theory if you want. I can apply that to my own family experience. Things that happened in childhood when I was not, that aware. If you're maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, when you start getting 10, you know, some people are tried as adults sometimes when they kill when they're 14, etc. But what I'm saying is that our history and our historical actions have consequences. Is anybody interested in Christianity who doesn't think like this is a superstitious person. I'm reading a lot about, as I've said, critical, views of Christianity. I finished Crossan. I'm still reading Burton Max, who wrote the New Testament, extremely skeptical about even Jesus, anything he might have said. He's pictured as, interestingly enough, like a stoic or cynic philosopher. Jesus was a social reformer. Jesus spoke about the kingdom, I think, according to him, but he was really more into pithy aphorisms, sayings of wisdom, and really wasn't interested in eschatology or the end of the world or crucifixion or saving anybody or anything like that. And so we do have a stake, or if we consider ourselves Christians or Catholics, we have a stake in being coherent with the real gospel, which is not a superstitious gospel of success where you only look at things that are interesting to you and repress or push aside anything that is a challenge to your comfort zone, so to speak. And that's why, we have these statistics about how many people don't profess religion, and the evangelicals, these so-called evangelicals, and many, many Catholics supporting a scoundrel like Trump and a liar like Trump. Um, well, that is totally incompatible with any honest notion of Christianity. Now that this storm has hit the state of Florida so hard, President Biden, who I think is a real Catholic, is meeting with Governor DeSantis, who has really ridiculed Biden. I mean, the image to me of Governor DeSantis is when he basically scolded and almost pushed away these innocent students wearing face masks in the middle of the pandemic. And I'm not, going to pronounce myself on the pandemic or its handling as if I were not only an expert but a Monday morning quarterback. I'm not going to do that. But that scientists and well-intentioned people were coming up with the best solutions, that they could deduce from their data and training, and Fauci has served for over 40 years, way before the culture wars got like they got. And to have him get death threats and all that, those are bad people that do that. And those are the people that Trump incited and who attacked the Capitol. And that's why I have close, dear friends whom I cannot talk at all politics or with. So thank God they're not interested in religion very much. Sometimes we agree on some of that. But they Liz Cheney is a scumbag because she's ventilating the truth of what happened January 6th. So that I made a list of things that worry me, starting with the climate. And again, my point being that we have to have a reverential, respectful attitude toward the planet. And we can't be blinded by profits or this economic progress type of thing. We live in a wonderful planet. If you believe in God, you believe God created a beautiful planet, not perfect. There are going to be earthquakes and there are going to be storms. But if you start burning off, forests and everybody in their own car, I understand car manufacturers were against public transportation in the beginning because they were thinking only of their profits. We see a small number have more and more money. Many other people are basically insulted and cast aside, like the poor in the prophet Amos when they ask for $15 an hour. So I'm convinced by now completely that the rich and powerful do and undo whatever they want, and it can be from whatever side. They just did a deal with Venezuela, who has I think, a comical, pseudo socialistic, just corrupt successor of Hugo Chavez. These leftists, yes, they were able to ruin an economy and an oil bonanza in record time. That's very bad. But they just did a deal where they released two convicted drug dealers, relatives or children, I think, of the wife of Maduro in Venezuela in a prisoner exchange thing. You have North Korea shooting rockets, Putin attacking Ukraine. And in the midst of all this chaos, you have the liars and manipulators washing the little brains of these people that are brainwashable. Polarization, doesn't mean that the solution is to split the baby in half. That both sides are wrong. There's good people on both sides. In the Klan or something, there's good people. The truth is the truth, and the truth is that uh, people should pay taxes and pay their share. Trump brags about not paying taxes. And then, of course, you should help other nations and regularize the immigration situation. That's a horrible tragedy. And DeSantis and other Republicans have, dramatically shipped off these immigrants. Now, if you have any kind of a human heart, forget about the Christian heart. Let's not use big words right now. Just human. I mean, you have desperate people who are not going to stop coming, just like you're going to have desperate women who are not going to stop having abortions. And the solution can't be Hitlerian, draconian, repressive, hateful, angry, ship them on a bus, etc. But you have to really deal with the fact that countries in Central America, in which the United States again has had a big role in exploiting United Fruit Company and many other companies. If you study this history, I've studied it since Mexico almost 50 years ago. You're not going to tell me a fairy tale at this stage of the game. These are countries that, Nicaragua, the United States put Somoza in. Honduras, you had a coup d'etat, an overthrow of the government. Panama was created from Colombia, exploiting differences that exist. And then you have puppet regimes that depend on United States money or want the United States money. So what I'm saying is are we our brother's keepers, which is the question asked in Genesis. So when you see these people, many of whom have jumped on those trains and lost limbs, and they are desperate, from Venezuela, from Central America, Honduras, many of the people that I go to church with, the solution has to be rational and clear, and I don't think it has been, and it has not been communicated as such. But what the manipulators do, you could maybe accuse Biden of being negligent or not on the ball, but you can accuse Trump and DeSantis of being manipulators and throwing red meat at this enraged base that is afraid of this invasion from the South, but is not afraid of an attack on the Capitol, or is apparently not, has not been concerned since the days of Bush, W. Bush, about the climate. They were climate deniers back then. Now maybe they're not as in denial, but their policies and their conversion has not taken place. And so this gesture by Biden of helping, because now DeSantis is in over his head, as anybody would be with a devastating storm like that, you need to cooperate. You need to set aside political differences, like Biden said, and the government has to step in. These people that say, no, no government, we don't want government, smaller government. The bottom line to me is you have to organize the world and society in a way that the best are the leaders, the philosopher king idea. I know that's an idealistic thing, Plato. But virtue and simple living and stressing virtues, and not the flashy flaunting and manipulation of people, which even of course Facebook is involved in that. Once you get the money profit motive, that is the rock bottom truth. You cannot love God and money. The minute you're too attached to money, colors everything. You come up with all kinds of explanations for why it's okay to really love money and not want to pay taxes and not pay attention. Which brings me to this reflection that I wanted to go over again. Because when I think of myself sometimes doing these videos, I say to myself, Emilio, you certainly don't perhaps communicate joy or humor as much as you might. Well, I don't do it because I try to share my thoughts as someone who's close to 70, who has studied a lot and lived in many different places with many wise people, especially members of the Dominican order, and many Jesuit professors, some of them incredibly great men like Cardinal Albert Vanois, that I've mentioned in these videos. He was my professor at the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Rome on Letter to the Hebrews. Joseph Blenkingsop, a great expert on the Old Testament. And I've had professors at Harvard that were very good. In law school, which I went to and graduated from, in addition to my doctorate in sacred theology. So I still see myself humbly as a teacher in the church, even though I may not be the best example or the best teacher. But in Acts 13, there were teachers and prophets and teachers in the church, and I think I can broadly, after 14 years teaching in a seminary, say that I am a teacher. But there's a famous saying that everybody loves in the prophet Micah, and everybody's heard of it. And it basically says, you have been told Adam, I'd have to look at the actual Hebrew of it as best as I can. Let's see if I can figure it out too. Higiv lecha Adam. So you have been shown, O Adam, person, humanity, ma tov, what is good, and what Yahweh doresh, seeks, uh, mimcha, from you, ki im, if not except that uh, azot, that you do mishpat, that you do social justice. That's what mishpat, from judging, has to do with. We ahavat, and that you love chesed. And chesed, I have, from my looking at where it occurs, Rahab and Ruth and many others, and even in the New Testament, you can transpose the word chesed into some other word in the New Testament. The sower who plants everywhere, sows his seeds everywhere. He's crazy, meshuggah. Or the vineyard owner who pays everyone the same daily wage, whether they worked an hour or the whole day. Unexpected acts of kindness. I give the example I learned in Hebrew class in Rome. David has chesed and sends two emissaries to the king of Moab, I think it is, in 1st or 2nd Samuel. They can't believe it. He's like their enemy. So they cut off their beards and their tunics, and their half their asses out. Because when you do chesed, unexpected, incredible acts of kindness, people don't believe you. I think Biden has come to Florida with chesed. So Micah, this is the translation of Micah, that you love chesed, we hadsanea lechem im Elohecha, or leket, and that with an attentive, somewhat worried manner, you walk with Elohecha, your God. Most of the translations are going to say that you walk humbly with your God. But I looked it up in my best Hebrew dictionary. It's a root, sana, which is in doubt, but in the hifil, which is the form of the verb used in Micah 6:8, it has various Greek translations. For example, or even in the Peshitta, the Aramaic, to be ready. Theodotion, one of the Septuagint Greek translators of the Old Testament, has asphalisesthai. This is where asphalt comes from. That's what Luke uses in the beginning of his gospel, to be very careful, don't slip. That's the translation this famous Greek translator of the Old Testament, early days, the time of Christianity, Theodotion, says translates be careful. The Quinta, another version of the Septuagint, frontizane, to go around anxiously. And then the famous Vulgate in Latin, solicitum ambulare. This dictionary translates go around anxiously. Thus, the exact translation equivalent of this word hadsneia is difficult, traditionally humble. That was Luther and even Gesenius. The NRSV, the REB, walk humbly with your God. But other more recent proposals apparently cautious, careful, wisely, reasonable, careful, attentive, deliberate. It's not a happy or just humble. This is a very interesting passage. God wants you to love, number one, mishpat, or to do, not love, practice it. Practice mishpat. And mishpat has various meanings. It comes from the verb, shafat, to judge, which in the Bible, when they say judge me, it means render justice to me. Judicame Deus, et discerne causa meam. The poor widow that goes to the judge repeatedly. So mishpat it has various meanings. It could be the code, when you elect the king, the mishpat of the king will be that he will tax you and do all these things. The servant will teach mishpat to the nations. Mo Winkle, chapter 42 of Isaiah, Mo Winkle said this meaning of mishpat is right religion. But then you have this very famous chesed, that you love chesed. So here you have to do mishpat and to love chesed. And chesed with the Hasidic Jews, Hasidim, etc. As I said, you look it up in the Bible, how it's used, and it's really extraordinary. God is known as for chesed and emet. In Exodus 34, I talked about this in other places, but it's a lot of videos. Emet, where we get amen from, has to do with firmness, reliability, faith, emuna, trust, worthiness, reliability, firmness. And I've said God can be relied on or can be expected to always do chesed, which means he can always be expected to do the unexpected in kindness. And, Ruth is praised for her chesed in taking care of Naomi. Rahab is praised for her chesed, even in the letter to the Hebrews, this prostitute or innkeeper who takes care of Joshua and the spies, etc. And again, chesed has to do with the father of the so-called prodigal son. He runs out and kisses the son who has squandered everything and wanted his father basically dead, or acted as if his father were dead in asking for the inheritance. I know a priest that is a horrible priest that I've heard in more than I want to hear. He hated that parable. He said it sends the wrong message. Well, the message is not let your kids do whatever they want. But the message is to have the same compassion God has, who rains down on good and bad alike, as Matthew, another gospel, says. And that's what we need to have. And that's what the manipulators. You look at this, you're looking at the interview with this guy that I don't even know what he's done. Shia LaBeouf fell in love with the Latin Mass, fell in love with Padre Pio. He says, I don't understand the Latin Mass. I don't even care about Christianity that much. But the mystery of the Latin Mass, wow, that's where it's at. Well, that's a consumer issue. I meditate, or maybe I prefer drugs, or I prefer something else. Religion in my service, not this chesed baloney. I want to do what makes me feel good. And that's why I question myself, Emilio, are you trying to make people feel good with these videos? Well, not really, except insofar as feeling good is a result of virtue, which is one of the things I am trying to practice and to teach. See what the watch is doing. I've been reading Seneca, as I've said, and I'm now on page 360 of his letters to Lucilius. And this guy, who I think in the Middle Ages people thought he would have been he was a Christian. A lot of similarities in some cases with Paul, etc. I don't know, but I do know he stresses virtue. He stresses the happiness. How do you define that? We would have to see. But happiness comes from practicing virtue. It doesn't come from the absence of pain or the absence of discomfort or the absence of illness. I'm sure Seneca would say happiness is not avoiding Eon, which, by the way, I couldn't help but think that I double-checked and Googled it to be sure. Eon obviously is like Ivan, which is Johan. Another Hebrew word, chen, which we translate as favor or grace, like in Anna or Hannah. Johanan, Jonathan, that's a little different. God, Yahweh has given something. But, even avoiding a hurricane, which I was glad to have avoided it, he says that's not really what happiness is. Happiness is to be in harmony with what nature demands. And Seneca waxes prolific, very romantic. I don't mean boy-girl romantic, the romanticist. He thinks that the primitive person, living in caves and dressed in skins were really happy. They lived really with nature. But the important thing to me is that, and this is where I am sort of at. Even sometimes when my faith fails, and I say, what if Jesus, by some, fluke or something, was simply a good man who met a very bad fate? Well, as a Christian, I believe that the bad fate of crucifixion and humiliation and suffering that he met was ultimately vindicated by God on the third day with the resurrection. And Paul is a witness to that on the road to Damascus. But I'm a little bit Jewish this way. I think basically what I believe, and even what I love, or at least what I believe, is not as important as what I try to do. That's why the Gospel of Matthew, considered very Jewish, is deeds, not words. Lord, Lord, didn't we do miracles on the marketplaces? And didn't you preach in our church? And didn't we, do miracles in your names and all this stuff? I never knew you, you workers of anomia, of lawlessness, maybe some sort of anti-Torah, anti-God's revelation. You blabbed real well, but you did not work this mishpat. You did not love chesed. And so I would not be able to sell out. If somebody said to me, here's an opportunity to make this money or some other thing, because that would really make me unhappy. It would be, Gandhi said, truth is God. And so on this day of Yom Kippur, I'm actually saying that it's more important to do what Micah says, really. Not just, walking humbly. There are other Hebrew roots that have more to do with humility down to the ground type of thing, humus. But this, Jerome, with his consultations with Jewish, experts and all that, he came up with solicitum, to be sort of solicitous, which, if we were to look that up, would have to do with this cautious, careful, wise, reasonable, attentive, paying attention to what's important, not just to what we like. I know people that they just guess at, for example, what a group stands for regarding the death penalty. They don't investigate what the group says. They guess what they would like the group to think, so that it's in agreement with their own views. So that they are not deliberate or careful or attentive. They are not walking humbly with their God. And I think that is the greatest problem we have. And when we have political leaders, especially in one party, who know better, but prefer to throw the red meat out to these people who have not been helped. They've been made even less intelligent, more bewildered, angrier, more adrenaline, but less thought. If you contribute to that, you have no basis claiming to be a Christian. I'll end with one last little example of things that do get my goat. When things were very heated in the days of Obama, I guess, I may have said this in some other video, I've done a lot of videos, 500 of them, or something between English and Spanish. I went to a gas station which had two pumps, and a man had parked himself in a way that deprived me of the use of the other pump, because the hose was not long enough to get to my car. He had stationed himself, oblivious to the fact, inattentive, that these were two pumps for two cars, gas pumps, and that maybe he thinks nobody there, so I can do it. Doesn't think ahead. Lungimiranza, the Italians say, you look a little farther and say, maybe somebody's coming right now. Typical. And so I said to him, sir, and he saw my cross, he saw my looks maybe, and immediately this was his response justification. I was a Latin. I've probably been in this country longer than he was, because although he wasn't much younger than me, he made it an ethnic, racial situation. An honest person says, "I'm sorry, I didn't think. I'll make my car go up a little bit." Do you think he offered to do that? He did not offer to do that. He got into a dispute with me, and my with my tendencies in religion and all that. I said to him, "I just hope you're not a Christian, or much less a Catholic, with an attitude like that." And he goes, "Oh, I'm a Christian, but my wife is a Catholic." And I said, "Well, you're not acting Catholic. You've hogged a pump you didn't need. You couldn't use two pumps. You deprived me, and then you insult me ethnically and racially." And that to me is a snapshot of millions and millions of Americans. And guess what they pay attention to? And guess what they don't pay attention to? And with those words, I will end.